All right, well, let's continue now. This is the main event, of course, and this coming Saturday on CBS and Paramount Plus, legendary broadcaster Clive Tyldesley will call his 30th European Cup final or Champions League final. Coincidentally, his first one also at Wembley back in 1978. And with that, we are truly honored now to be joined by the man himself. The great Clive Tyldesley joins us here on Caught Offside. Clive, welcome to the show. And what do you remember about that first one back in 78?
I'm not sure about legendary. Legends are fictional, guys. They didn't really happen. I'm actually here.
You're not just some AI creation?
You can say it. You can say it. Come on, you can say it. Yeah, 1978 was a local radio station on Merseyside. I'd only been in broadcasting for 2 or 3 years, and Liverpool at Wembley, and alongside me, my co-commentator. Probably of all the people that I've been privileged to meet in football, the one that if I could go back and spend more time with, it would be Bill Shankly.
Wow.
Hugely charismatic. If he'd been a politician, he would have won landslide votes every single year. If he'd been a priest, he had that kind of Presbyterian zeal when he spoke, and he would have converted the entire planet. You just believed everything that I wanted to believe everything that Bill said, and he was sat alongside me that night. And my friends were on the field. I mean, I was the same age as the players. It was an era when not only did I know them professionally, I tended to travel with them, often on the team bus to a game, staying in the hotel with them. And then, of course, an era when we could go and have a few beers after the game without somebody taking a snap on a mobile phone and posting it on Instagram 15 minutes later. So that's a really kind of special experience. And those early days, watching your mates play for the very best club team in the world, and having, say, one of the greatest men I've ever met alongside me. Yeah, it was a good start.
Clive, you've led me down a road here. We were going to start by talking about the current final, but you said on a podcast in 2021 that the relationship between football and its media was gone, was changed. What did you mean by that?
Well, I just think probably these were naive days. I mean, I'm always very conscious when I'm just starting a podcast, would you believe, with Martin O'Neill. It's launching next week. And Martin was my very first friend in football. We're both just either side of 70 years of age now. And we're very aware of that. And we're very aware that we're talking to a lot of people who are young enough to be our grandchildren, let alone our children. But I do think, and we're very careful to relate to contemporary football, I do think that a lot of the basics and the principles, both in football and in broadcasting, in communication, are as relevant today as they were back then. What has changed is the landscape of the platforms, the technology, and the technology obviously is changing football now with VAR. But the way that we communicated back in the day, the way that Bill Shankly reached the Liverpool public is very much the same model as Jurgen Klopp has used
Right.
in the most recent times. So you can actually reflect on our earliest experiences and relate them to today. But that trust has broken down, and it's been broken down as much, I think, on either side. And really, if you think of the purpose of the media, it is we are the privileged people who get to meet the doers, get to sit in the best seat, and therefore act as a messenger from them to their public, the people who put them on the pedestals and put them in the Hollywood Hills and mansions and stuff where they live. But that distance as between the public and the players has grown because the media can no longer, or does no longer, do a good enough job in bringing the two together. And it's just a lack of trust on both sides. And yeah, I mean, every means of media communication, including this one, has changed, changes, it seems, by the day. And we're always trying to keep up with it, and it's made us very defensive. I think I'm very aware now as a live commentator, there's far more jeopardy involved in what comes out of my mouth than there used to be.
But even Clive, I think of the example, like you would know the Manchester United team before a European Cup tie. Like you would go and speak to Sir Alex Ferguson and he would tell you, well, Keane's got a hamstring, Beckham is broken a toe, whatever. But he would tell you that, and he would trust that you would not say that to anybody.
I was frightened of him. That helps. Terrified. Yeah. I've had the two biggest rollickings of my life from Sir Alex Ferguson. But he's been very, very good to me, and very, 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 very kind and very trusting. I inherited a good professional relationship from my predecessor, the late great Brian Moore. I knew one of Alex's boys, Darren. It's not Darren, Jason. I worked with in my early TV days. He was a TV match director. So I actually stayed at the Ferguson house one night after a game. I actually stayed at the family house.
It just wouldn't happen now.
Well, no, and it can't happen now. It's and there wouldn't be, some of the tales that I'm swapping at the moment with Martin O'Neill about the way Cloughie managed. We have to be very, very careful, because some of it would be interpreted, and maybe was bullying, but certainly would be interpreted as bullying in the 21st century. And I think an awful lot of contemporary sport is much better. It's much better that the players don't drink. It's much better that the managers don't, the coaches don't bully the players.
Yeah.
It is, in that sense, the game has become more mature, but it's just the invasion of privacy. And I always say, I don't know what your local corner supermarket is, but I always say that 20, 25 years ago, you might just have seen a Premier League striker in a supermarket shopping. Yeah. You wouldn't have. Why would they get out of their car? Because we would immediately besiege them with requests for selfies and then publish them straight away. And I mean, why would they? It's very, very sad. It's a shame.
Yeah. Clive, you mentioned there in passing that you've had the two biggest rollickings of your career from Alex Ferguson. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't at least ask, can you recount those? What
it would take a long time to recount. I was innocent in both. Well, I wouldn't be sitting here now if I hadn't been innocent.
Oh.
I'm still waiting for an apology on both counts, and I'm not holding my breath. He was a great one for moving on. He was a great one for dealing with the moment and then moving on. I think that maybe of all his greatest qualities, his ability to move with the times and actually manage Cristiano Ronaldo in a different way to that he managed Ryan Giggs, for instance, at the start of his career. I think he adapted to the changing nature of the 20th century and into the 21st. He had three boys of kind of footballing age. Darren obviously played for him at Manchester United and is now a successful coach, which I think gave him an insight into the changing nature of, because parenting is very similar to coaching in many, many ways. So he had the blinkers off, but yeah, I mean, he could hit you with one if he thought you were out of order, and he thought I was out of order on a couple of occasions, and I got it both barrels, and 4 or 5 days later it was forgotten about, which. Yeah, that's the best you can hope for. I always knew who the boss was, so there was no way I was going to argue back.
Yeah, boy, there's so many elements of your career that I want to recount. But let's fast forward a little bit to the reason that we're here now, and that's to look forward to Saturday's game. Including this year, Real Madrid have appeared in 6 of the last 11 finals. They've won the previous 5. They're heavily favored again in this one to win it. Their league form, it can fluctuate. The faces over the years have changed, and yet they just remain this constant force in this specific competition. How do they do this? What is in their DNA that allows for this to happen? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, it's something we touched on quite a lot in the coverage, I think, on CBS Golazo and on Paramount Plus. I know that Jamie believes this, and I certainly do. And Pep Guardiola believes it, because he talked a lot about it in the last few years, that for however good and however dominant Manchester City have become they almost had to serve an apprenticeship in the Champions League. It's just different. It's just a competition where it's very difficult to come and make an immediate impression. I mean, I think it's was Fuzzy Zeller the last person to win at Augusta of the first attempt? You know, I think it's kind of like that. I think you've kind of got to come and play 3 or 4 Masters. I mean, there were 1 or 2 first timers in with a chance. This time it was Oberg's first Masters, and I think there's an equivalent there that for some reason you've almost got to come and play some practice rounds and get some bruises and learn the hard way. And Real Madrid have never actually had to do that because they won the first 5 way back, kind of in the years that I was born. And those white shirts, which I remember peering between the heads of adults when my father took me to see them for the first time in the late 1960s, playing at Old Trafford against Manchester United. And there was just something almost fantastical about them. Just the name, the Real Madrid. And we saw very little live European football on TV in the UK back then, but I knew the names of the players. You know, I knew who played for Real Madrid. And I just think that now when Bellingham and Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo put on that shirt, they know that it's the same badge that Ronaldo wore. They know it's the same badge that, you know, all of those Galacticos of 10 and 12 and 15 years ago. And even though they would know nothing of, I mean, Dani Carvajal will equal a record set by a guy called Paco Gento in this final. Now, again, when you're talking in 2024, it's very important that you relate who the hell these guys are, because Gento's not the most famous footballer that ever played for Real Madrid, but he's the most decorated. And he was really, really good. He was kind of more my father's era. But, you know, he was a really pacey winger from the Basque Country. And it's very important I tell that backstory when I talk about Gento. But to mention Carvajal in the same breath and the same level of achievement, I mean, talk about being there, seen it, and you know, got the T-shirt. He's got 6 of the damn T-shirts, you know? And I mean, it's just extraordinary. You're trying to give some, I don't know, context to a footballer's achievements, because I know that I'm introducing a lot of these players for the first time to an American audience. You're always going to be appreciative of that. And so I often try to make comparisons with the greats of NBA and NFL and NHL and so on, just to try to give some idea of what this guy is achieving tonight. And just by walking onto the field at Wembley on Saturday, Carvajal will be equaling an extraordinary piece of history. And he must know that when he walks on. He must know that even though he never saw Gento play, that's the level that he's reached here. And that's what's expected of him. And I think they do carry an aura, because not only they know it, Borussia Dortmund know it too.
Sure. Yeah, and it's interesting with Borussia Dortmund. There must be a certain fun, and I'm guessing that there's a certain fun in looking at the card, the analysis card that you've just made out for these absolute, you know, doyens of European football in Real Madrid, and then you go to a rather more ragtag bunch that includes, you know, names like Nicholas Füllkrug, and no disrespect to him, but Emre Can, guys we didn't expect to see here. I know you're only halfway through your process, working on your process right now, but is there anything from Borussia Dortmund that's exciting you?
Yes, there's nothing. I would suggest there is nothing logical to suggest they can win the final.
Okay,
but that doesn't mean they can't win the final. We know that it's live sport, and we know how this works. There is nothing logical about anything that Real Madrid do anyway in the Champions League. You know, they win the competition again, and then we spend the next 3 months scratching our head and wondering how on earth they even got to the final, let alone we're there again. You know, I think I said it in the commentary 3 weeks ago in the Bernabeu, that when Joslu's second goal was confirmed by the VAR, that it is the most extraordinary conclusion to a football match you can imagine, except they always do it. And so why would we be surprised? I was kind of trying to mix the drama of it with well, of course they do. It's Real Madrid. Of course they were never going to win it half an hour ago. They were always going to wait until the very end to win it in a ridiculous fashion, with a 34-year-old coming off the bench and scoring 2 goals. and then another goal getting disallowed even after that's happened. That is Real Madrid. So that inevitability that we've just talked about, I've just knocked down, because they could have gone out of the competition, clearly could have gone out in the quarterfinals to Manchester City, and they certainly could have gone out in the semi-finals to Bayern Munich. I thought they were going out with 10 minutes to play. There was no sign really of them getting back into the game. Borussia Dortmund have had fortune on the way. I mean, they didn't concede a goal in the semi-finals. That is a fact.
Amazing.
And we know that PSG hit the frame of their goal on 6 separate occasions. You know, on those fearful stats that we put on the screen, they are all off-target attempts. Well, they're not really.
No.
They kind of hit
two
target,
on target.
hit the wrong part of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and they were behind in both quarterfinals. They finished 5th in the German league. They have had a kind of difficult 2 years, in so much they've lost both Haaland and Bellingham in the last 2 years. You know, if we were picking teams now, selecting teams of Euro All-Stars, they would be 2 of our first selections. They both played for Borussia Dortmund in the last 3-4 seasons and now are gone. So they've had to try to replace them. They've had to live in the shadow of Bayer Leverkusen all season, as everybody in Germany has. But they have found a formula to get through, and they'll have a puncher's chance out there. But they are getting in the ring with Ali. They are getting in the ring with Tyson. I mean, that, and they know that. And I think I can't. There hasn't been a great final. Well, maybe 18 in Kiev was, you know, with the Bale overhead. I thought the one in Paris was a good final rather than a great final. 1 goal separate the last 4, as settled the last 4. Would you either a bonkers final of like a Real Madrid semi, or would you a 4-0? And I'm not a predictor. I never do predictions, but my gut is that Real Madrid will win this comfortably and with great style.
Well, yeah.
That's I want something.
That's probably
different.
the majority opinion, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Clive, you know, you mentioned that call that you had at the end of the Real Madrid match about sort of the inevitability of it, and in some ways, I thought it was almost reminiscent of your Manchester United call in '99. Can Manchester
There's no
United
VAR
score?
in 1999.
Well, that's true.
When the ball went in the net and the referee pointed, I knew it was a goal.
The can Manchester United score? They always score. Do you? I mean, like we said, this will be your 30th final. Does that one, the specialness of that one in '99, do you hold that in almost a separate place from the rest of them?
Well, that's up to the audience, really. I would say that we're all a matter of opinion. You, me, and
Clive, I've got to stop you. It's unreal. Sorry, that commentary from you, like it lives on its own. It absolutely does. Like, first of all, starting with name on the trophy, like that, you couldn't do better than that. Yeah, I know you're being modest here, but that's got to be one of your top ones.
I had a mentor who was a boxing commentator, actually. Some American audiences might be aware of Reg Gutteridge. Certainly, the great American fighters of the 70s and 80s and 90s were very aware of him. Muhammad Ali came to visit Reg in hospital when he was ill, and Reg just took me under his wing. I didn't ask him to. It was tough love. And one of the many messages that he gave me was that the greatest moments in football, the great goals, the great moments are individual. They are different from the last one and will be different from the next one. Your challenge is to find words instantly which fit that moment. When the great goal is scored or the dramatic late winner is scored, unbelievable, fantastic, incredible doesn't do it. Not for Reg. That wasn't enough. You had to find something of significance. I mean, we're talking about an era when the back page of the newspaper, you know, we all picked up the morning newspaper back then. He wanted to see tomorrow's headline. What is tomorrow's headline? Editorialize it. It's almost like an act of journalism, a piece of journalism. Tell me what is different about that moment. What does it mean? What does it signify? Which is quite a challenge, and it's a challenge that I failed more often than not. But if you do get them right, and if you're not careful, you can try too hard to get them right and get them wrong as a result. But if you do get them right, and probably the very best piece of that commentary, if I'm judging it, is the 7 or 8 seconds where I said nothing immediately after, you know, and Solskjaer has won it or whatever, sharing them. That was what Reg would say, that's not resting time, that's thinking time. You know, the famous Jim Nance commentary at Augusta after Tiger won again, where we didn't speak for 3 minutes or whatever. I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, some people would say that's the greatest piece of commentary, but and yet he said nothing. You know, sometimes particularly obviously in television, the pictures are enough, but I don't think that's the case in a football match. I think you've got to come up with something, but if you can give yourself some thinking time and then deliver the significance of it, the editorial significance of it, if you can capture that at that moment, then that's what, yeah, and then it becomes part of people's memories forever and a day. And you're very, very fortunate that very kind people like yourself still refer to them now. It was a very, very important match for me. Another late great Brian Moore retired after the '98 World Cup final. So even though it was my second Champions League final as a TV commentator, it was my first as the senior commentator. And if I'd messed up that night, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. I'd be an accountant working in a bank or something.
along those lines, I always wanted to ask you, and Solskjaer has won it, that call. The ball, it finds him so quickly and somewhat unexpectedly. It's kind of off a flicked header off the corner, and he's there at the back post. You called it immediately. You were on it. It was Solskjaer. He scored the goal. After you said it, was there any brief moment in your head of, oh dear God, I hope that was him? Or did you know right away?
It's a fair point, Andrew. I think you do after every goal, to be honest. But in many ways, you know, that broke the cardinal rule of commentary, because if Bayern had gone down the other end and equalised, and it had gone to extra time and penalties, and back then the Germans always won the penalty shootout, so there would have been an effigy of me hanging from some lamppost in the middle of Manchester. It would have been my fault, you know, if you know, never call the winner of the Kentucky Derby across the line until the Nags actually got ahead past the post. But you sensed it, obviously. But they were totally broken by the drama of what had happened, and we were pretty much out of time. And yeah, I shouted it out, and as I say, I managed to get the right 2 players. But you can only work with the material, and during that period of my career, starting in '99, ITV, which is the channel that I worked for then, had exclusive rights to the Champions League, and we got the Liverpool final in '05, which was dramatic, and as dramatic, probably crazier game. Then we had Manchester United versus Chelsea, a penalty shootout, and then we had Chelsea winning in Munich against Bayern with the Drogba equaliser. So, boy, I had some material to work with. I mean, if you can't work with that kind of material, then you don't belong.
Yeah. Last night in preparation, so we were very excited to have you on, and Andrew sent me what can only be described as, for me, as a Liverpool supporter, I would describe it as disturbing footage of you analysing the Gerrard goal where you went, hello. Now, that for me, that is ingrained in my memory. And when the anniversary came around last week, Liverpool hosted that, and they didn't use their in-house commentary. They had your commentary. And the Gerrard goal, it literally, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up when you said hello like that. And yet you aren't happy with that.
It was a bit of an act. I don't know if it was the same interview. Liverpool played Paris Saint-Germain a couple of years earlier. It was the people who follow English football regularly. It was the team that turned out in the white suits at Wembley for the FA Cup final, lost to Manchester United, the kind of Spice Boys thing. And they stamped the place out that night in Paris. They were, I think, 2, maybe 3-0 down at half time. And I had an editor who was a good friend in my, we have a guy who can talk to you in your ear without the rest of you hearing. And I pretty much wrote them off when I think the 3rd goal went in. And there was still a second leg to come at Anfield. And he started in my ear, come on, build this up. And I very rarely during my career, I've had an editor saying, you're reading this wrong. Come on, you've got to do something else. But I tried for the next couple of minutes, and then PSG scored again. And I went on my key to him, so you can't hear. And said, "What do I try now then?" You know? And I think I hammed that a little bit. I mean, what happened in the next 7 minutes wasn't likely, was it? Let's face it.
No.
Little did you know how right you were.
You know, but yeah, it was great. Stephen's performance that night was just, I mean, he played in 3 different positions that night. He was the best right back in the world for about 25 minutes.
That's right.
And then there's I mean, this is how silly it is. I don't know if you've read the book, the Guillaume Balaguer book with Rafa Benitez and the halftime interval when, you know, the famous team talk, but actually he had a board which had 12 counters on first, and then it had 10 counters on. Xabi Alonso came on, and half the dressing room didn't know he'd gone out to warm up. And I mean, it was, or Didi came on.
Didi Hamann came on.
Didi came on.
Steve Finnan came off, and Hamann came on.
Yeah, and Steve Finnan didn't want to come off.
No.
He had a big row. In fact, Traore was coming off. And then the physio said, we've got a bit of a problem with Steve Finnan. And so it was chaotic in that dressing room. I mean, nothing of any order or inspiration happened during those 15 minutes. But they went back out again, and they scored 3 times in 7 minutes. And actually, Milan continued to dominate the game even after that. And Jerzy made that save, which no goalkeeping coach in the world. It's sport, for goodness' sake. And it was my fault for trying to explain it. Just go with it. I got it right. Thank goodness I got it right.
Clive, you've been so generous with your time. We promise we won't keep you too much longer, as I know you're in deep prep for this weekend's game. One of the players this game that I'm sure you've been researching heavily, who kind of bridges both teams, Jude Bellingham, just won La Liga's Player of the Season. Phil Foden won Premier League Player of the Season. Harry Kane coming off a 44-goal, 12-assist season for Bayern Munich.
Don't say it. Please don't say it.
They're all English. They're all English. And I respect your perspective on this stuff so much, because you've seen a lot of it over the years. This England team and these Euros coming up this summer, I don't want to be prisoner of the moment here, but is this among, or maybe the most talented England team that you've come across?
I think that definitely can win it. And I think they're definitely one of the 4 most likely nations to win. The coach is a really close personal friend. He knows it. I mean, he's trying to, because he is such an intelligent man who's trying to deflect the attention away from the players. But he knows it. I'm not telling any tales out of school to say, we've had private conversations. He knows the opportunity. I would throw Declan Rice into that mix, by the way. He would have been my player of the year in England. We have some holes in our squad. And we can't sign anybody. It's national football. You can't just go out and get a left back, because it doesn't look like Luke Shaw's going to make it.
Or you can just get the Irish centre midfielder, Declan Rice. You can do that.
I just mentioned Declan. But it's sport. I mean, probably the most important thing is that a lot of those players now have good tournament experience. I think playing for England is different from playing for Manchester City or Liverpool or any of the great club teams, Real Madrid. I think when you put the national shirt on, it is different. I think there's a different jeopardy, a different level of attention. A lot of kind of occasional football fans will watch the England games this summer. You only got to look at the television viewing figures to see the difference at the level of interest, and with that interest comes expectation, and with expectation comes pressure. It's like, I'm trying to make analogies with other sports. It's like Scheffler, every time he tees it up, why would you predict anybody else is going to win? Long as he can get past the police into the golf club, why isn't he going to win? And a little bit, there's a little bit of that with England at the moment, but I say there are 2 or 3 holes in the squad. And that's going to shape, I think, the way that Gareth approaches it, because that incredible attacking unit is going to have to help with the defense, because we have 1 or 2 issues in the natural defensive positions. So I think You know, we need somebody alongside Declan Rice in order to provide that protection. It may be that we've uncovered another absolute gem, but he's very raw, very, very young. Kobe Mainu. I think he'll start. I think he'll be in the team.
Wow.
You know, I think Gareth will trust him from the start. It's exciting and it's possible, yeah. And it is the best chance to win a major tournament that England have had, well, pretty much in my adult life, yeah.
Just one quick one on that. You know Gareth Southgate personally. He's a friend of yours. Is there a sense with this team that he knows there's not another, he probably won't be manager for another tournament? And is there a sense that with this, it's a much more adventurous selection than we've seen from him in the past, the provisional squad at least? Is there a sense that he's letting his hair down? He's kind of playing with house money here, and he feels, I don't know, released by the fact that he can just go at this tournament knowing that there won't be another one?
I think that's a myth. I really do. I think that he has been circumspect in his approach to the tournaments that he's managed England, because we might have been, I think the 2018 World Cup, which we could have won, strangely, we were probably, I think he would probably tell you that we were the 6th or 7th best team there. But rather like Borussia Dortmund, we got into a semi-final, we found ourselves in extra time. John Stones hit the post next time. We weren't being outplayed. We could have reached the final, and if you reached the final, you couldn't win it. You know, circumstances in tight games, the game in Qatar against France, Harry Kane, of all people, fails from the penalty spot at the time when you wouldn't back anybody else in the world. You wouldn't want anybody else in the world to take the penalty for you. But I think that experience of actually playing in tournaments, playing for England in a major tournament with all of that, all that jeopardy or that scrutiny, I think these players are a little bit more battle hardened now. So I think he feels that therefore they're more oven ready, if you like, to deal with whatever comes their way. And since with each one, we've added something else. Bellingham obviously is the big addition. You know, he was in the squad last time and figured last time, but now he's the prominent attacking player with Kane. And so these guys they're matured and they're as ready as they'll ever be. And it's not quite a perfect storm because of the issues in defence, but it's as good a chance as this group as Gareth's group have had. And I don't know anything, and I wouldn't even if he was sitting here now, ask him straight out, are you going to be the England manager in a year's time? Don't bet against it. That would, I think that people are putting 2 and 2 together and thinking that this is it. And obviously most coaches, most managers in most sports don't get the chance to make the decision themselves. It's made for them. But I don't bet against it, because he's just the right man for this job. And the players love him and they want to play for him. And he can handle all of the other aspects that go. It's almost like you're like a national leader when you're the coach of an England football team. So you've got to show all of the diplomacy and dignity and gravitas and sympathy to 21st century issues. He's got all of that. And I think he's better equipped and better and obviously now experienced to deliver the players to the field in the right frame of mind. And if we get the bounce of the ball, yeah, of course we can win it.
Clive, you've been so generous with your time, but I have to finish on a personal note. I'm 42 years of age, so
don't look it.
All right, thank you very much. It's the moisturizer.
No, I'm not a day over 41.
What do you have any concept?
Andrew's not, is he? Andrew's like, is Andrew your son then? Yeah. I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was talking to a father and son act. My goodness.
Clive, you know, it's a case of being when you're my age and you're a football fan. Do you have any concept of how much you have kind of your voice and your personality has kind of drilled into our psyches? Like for example, the other day, my girlfriend asked me what we were going to order for food for takeout. She suggested Chinese, and I replied, not for me, Clive. Like literally said that, and she's
Well, that's the
used.
fault of the guy behind you.
I know. That's Andy Townsend, but it's part of it. It's part of what you guys
We
brought.
maybe need to explain to people who this huge Shrek-like figure is
So I've
behind
got
you. One of
former
my best friends, by the way. But
right, former Aston Villa midfielder
Ireland.
and Republic of Ireland midfielder Andy Townsend, who became famous with you for your commentary double act. But you know, like, and even if we're playing football and we're messing around and we strike the ball and we hit it, your voice is the commentary in our head. Do you have any concept of what you may have done to this to my generation?
I can only apologize.
But what people say to you in the street with this, you know, like
I get a
surely-
little bit of that, I suppose. Yeah. Suddenly you open your mouth and maybe you're asking for a bottle of wine or something in the supermarket, and somebody turn around and say, "Are you Clive Tyldesley?" And I say, "Depends if you like him or not."
Right. Okay.
If you do like him, yes, I am. If you don't like him, I'm Martin Tyler. Please.
Here it is.
Yeah. Clive, this has been amazing. Can't wait for the game this coming Saturday. Kickoff at 3:00, but coverage I've seen is all day long across CBS.
All day long.
We're
having a team meal on Friday night. I mean, the match is the highlight, but a close run second comes sitting around a very decent table in a very decent restaurant in London on Friday night with Henri, Carragher, Richards, Schmeichel, Abdo, who's the most talented of the lot, by the way.
Yeah.
And putting the world to rights. So if that goes well, then the show may just get cancelled. You never know.
Yeah, get Martin O'Neill in there and put a recorder on the table. That should be your first podcast. I mean, oh man.
Well, our podcast is out next Monday. So
can't wait.
The football authorities.
Nice. Can't wait for that.
Brilliant.
CBS's coverage has been so great on the Champions League, and you, of course, have been such a huge part of it. And we can't wait for this Saturday, Real Madrid and Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League final. Clive Tyldesley, thank you so much for your time.
Enjoy the game, guys. Thank you for having me.